The next decade that I'm going to discuss is the 1980s. In the 1980s, we saw the invention of the Apple Macintosh computer, Microsoft invented Windows, and we also saw the invention of the CD-ROM. As far as work in the 1980s, economic recession was something that we were seeing worldwide. In the United States, capitalism was returning and people were starting to buy things such as designer clothes and European cars. In the 1980s, America became a true economic giant. We started trading trans-Pacifically, and this is what really cemented our status as an economic giant. The computer industry was really growing, and it was creating jobs for people left and right. Among those computer industries, one of the industries that was growing was Apple. Although in the early 80s it didn't see a whole lot of growth or success, by the end of the 80s it was one of the most successful computer companies in America. Apple Industries had to really fight for quite a while against the PC industry to become the economic giant that it is today. With the continued advancements in the quality of television and audio recordings, music became more and more important in the 1980s. By August 1st, 1981, we saw the creation of MTV, or music television. Although the idea of creating music videos was not new at the time, the idea of having an entire channel devoted to playing them was. As far as education goes, in the classroom, microcomputers were becoming more and more important. In the beginning of the 80s, they were mostly used for drill and practice purposes. This is the same way mainframe computers were used to begin with. Eventually, though, educators began to see them as useful for other things, such as productivity. This is the type of tool that companies like Microsoft were starting to provide. Windows was invented in 1985, and it had a range of programs that were available for use in the classroom. This program helped replace typewriters as the main productivity tool in classrooms around the world. Constructivism was also the big educational theory of this period of time. The use of computers also helped contribute to that personal journey that constructivism assumed that learning was at the time. In the 1980s, we had access to many more advanced technologies than we had in the previous years. We continued to build our toolbox of technologies, improving on old technologies to create new and better technologies. The creation of computer technologies really helped to advance the fields of education and work. Even though the 1980s were a time of ultimate capitalism, we saw a huge decline in the amount of jobs available for people to work. In the early part of the decade, many people were finding themselves out of work and in economic recession. Bankruptcies of businesses had a huge effect during this time. By 1983, though, people were finding themselves in a better place economically. Inflation wasn't as bad, and the economy got better. The year 2000 on has seen a great change in the economic status of the United States. We are still the largest economy, but global financial crisis began during this decade and has had a huge effect on us since then. Food and gas prices are at an all-time high in the United States, although we are still considered an economic giant. This was a time of extreme stress in the United States due to the bombing of the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The Iraq War officially began on March 19, 2003. It spawned many technological advancements such as drones and body armor. Although neither one of these things was a new technology, they were fine-tuned to be the best technology they could be. Both of these things were put to better use for all people involved. The internet has been a big player in education today. It can be used to teach kids and build their background knowledge with programs such as YouTube and Discovery Education. Technology can also be used to differentiate instruction on a whole new level for many, many kids. Technology has had a huge influence on our society today. We can now live, work, and collaborate with people who are thousands of miles away from us or right next door. This era depends on social media as a vehicle for collaboration. School has morphed to include the use of technology and in some cases has moved back to the idea of a one-room schoolhouse in a digital sense. The use of online schools has increased to include the K-12 student population as well as the college and post-college population. The 3 decades I have discussed here have been extremely influential in the grand scheme of things. In the 1960s, we saw advancements in recording devices as well as in personal banking with the invention of the ATM. These things made disseminating information easier and opened up the world of politics to the general public rather than just an elite few. The 1980s brought computers and MTV. Computers have continued to grow and create new technologies in many areas of our society. They have made both simple and difficult tasks easier and more accessible for more people. Microsoft created jobs for many people as they grew their technology to the most important component of many computers today. Computers have had an impact on school situations, making learning accessible for all people involved. MTV has helped the music industry grow and become a huge part of our society. From 2000 to now, we have seen the idea of inclusion in public education for all students grow leaps and bounds. Whether or not a student is actually in the classroom, they are able to access any and all information that's being disseminated to other students. Differentiated instruction is what it is today because of computers and technological advances. Other strands have likewise influenced technology. In the 1960s, the computer and housing industries took off due to people's need for both. People wanted to live where they worked, so it made sense to create suburbs so people could do just that. The automobile industry also benefited from this. The fact that people wanted more cars created more jobs for more people across the United States. Eventually, jobs in the automobile industry were better paying jobs than jobs in the agricultural industry. Education influenced the development of computers into comprehensive tools that met specific needs in the classroom.